There are things too powerful to be published, and voices so far ahead of their time, they must wait decades to be heard. New York City, winter of 1942. Nikola Tesla, frail and withdrawn, was spending his final days in room 3327 at the New Yorker Hotel. Most assumed he was finished, a forgotten mind fading into obscurity. But one morning, an unnamed visitor stepped into that room carrying a recorder and a question. What followed wasn't an interview about inventions. It wasn't about alternating current, nor wireless transmission, nor the Wardenclyffe Tower. It was something Tesla had never spoken of publicly, not because he couldn't explain it, but because the world wasn't ready. In his final hours, Tesla spoke not as an engineer, but as a witness. He talked of energy, not the kind that powers machines, but the energy that powers consciousness. He spoke of memory that survives the body, of vibrations that continue after the heart stops beating, of a universal frequency that doesn't fade when the light goes out. This conversation, long believed to be a myth, was hidden inside a private vault for nearly 80 years. It was sealed, unnamed, and left without context, just a small note that read, "For those who understand resonance." Today, for the first time, these words are being shared, not to convince, not to convert, but to remember, because what if death isn't an end? What if consciousness is not created, but received, and what if the energy that you call you never actually disappears? Let us begin. It was January 5th, 1943. Outside the New Yorker Hotel, snow was falling in thin, steady lines. Inside room 3327, Nikola Tesla sat near the window, wrapped in an old wool coat. The curtains were drawn just slightly open, allowing light to spill across a cluttered desk filled with diagrams, open notebooks, and copper wires that no longer served a purpose. He had not given a public talk in years. His name, once on the front page of every newspaper, had been reduced to quiet footnotes in academic journals. To the world, he had vanished. But in that room, Tesla was still listening, not with his ears, but with a kind of inner frequency. A young man, likely no more than 30, entered with a notepad and a quiet nervousness. He wasn't a journalist from any major paper. There was no camera, no crowd, just questions. He asked Tesla if he believed in life after death. Tesla looked up, his eyes clouded yet strangely luminous. He did not answer right away. Instead, he turned to the window and whispered something nearly inaudible. "Energy cannot die. It only changes form." The man asked him to explain. What followed was not a speech, but a slow unraveling of something Tesla had kept inside for years, a theory not of machines, but of souls. Tesla described what he called the living current, a vibrational pattern that pulses not through wires, but through people. He said that every thought, every emotion, every act of kindness or cruelty left an energetic imprint, a frequency, and while the body may decay, the frequency remains like a tuning fork still ringing long after it has been struck. He spoke of death not as a shutdown, but as a redirection of current, a wave collapsing into the greater field from which it came. In his words, "We are not made of matter. We are composed of motion." And then he said something that made the young man stop writing. "The body is the bulb. The soul is the electricity. When the bulb breaks, the light doesn't die. It just finds another path." There was a pause in the room. No sound. Only the slow creak of the old radiator and the ticking of a small brass clock beside the bed. Tesla turned back toward the young man and smiled. "You see, young man, they thought I was building machines, but I was only trying to build something that could explain what the eye cannot see. The movement of memory, the survival of resonance. That was the first page of the transcript, and it wouldn't be the last, because what followed was the blueprint of a universe where death has no authority, and consciousness is simply energy looking for its next form." For most of his life, Nikola Tesla was known for chasing currents, alternating current, wireless energy, resonance through the air. But in the final decade of his life, his focus quietly shifted. He stopped chasing electricity and began listening to something deeper, a kind of invisible frequency that he believed existed not in wires, but within us. He no longer spoke of voltage or induction. Instead, he began using unfamiliar language for a physicist, words like memory, field, and essence. According to the hidden pages of the interview, Tesla believed that behind every living being was a signature vibration, something unique, measurable, and eternal. He called it the soul frequency. To Tesla, the soul wasn't a metaphor. It was an energetic pattern, a waveform encoded with everything a being had ever felt, chosen, feared, or loved. And just like electricity, this pattern did not disappear at death. It dispersed, it diffused, it transferred. He explained it like this: take a wire coil, send current through it. Now, remove the coil, the current doesn't vanish. It seeks another conductor. So does the soul. He believed that what we call death was not a break, but a relay, a handoff from form to formlessness, from the scene to the field. Tesla had once spent months in Colorado Springs, building massive coils to harness wireless power. But what no one knew is that during that time, he claimed to have experienced something he never published. Late at night, while working under storm-lit skies, he began hearing tones he couldn't trace, frequencies that hummed not from the machine, but seemingly from within the air itself. At first, he dismissed them, but they returned, consistent, patterned, intelligent. In his private notes, he wrote, "I am beginning to suspect that the earth is not silent, that beneath the static there is signal." Years later, he would connect those signals not to another planet or mechanical interference, but to the residual energies of consciousness. He believed the earth itself might be a kind of receiver, a massive body picking up the faint, trailing signatures of souls that once lived here. He even speculated that certain geographic regions, the desert mesas, deep caves, old forests, acted like natural capacitors, holding the imprints of emotional events. That grief, love, violence, peace all left a charge, a memory, and that sensitive people could feel it without knowing why. Tesla called this the memory of place. He believed these energies did not belong to ghosts or spirits in the traditional sense. They were simply fields without forms, lingering echoes of people whose energy had not yet fully reintegrated with what he called the central field. The interviewer was skeptical. He asked, "If this energy survives, why don't we see it?" Tesla responded by pointing to the limits of our perception. "The human eye sees only a sliver of the spectrum," he said. "Just because we do not see the ultraviolet, does it mean it is not there? The soul exists in the same way, real, constant, just outside the current range of detection." And then he added something even more astonishing. "Eventually, we will build instruments that can detect the soul. We will photograph memory. We will chart vibration. And we will prove that death was always just a change in frequency." The young man sat in silence. He later noted in the transcript that Tesla's voice didn't sound like belief. It sounded like certainty, as if he had already seen what he was describing. And perhaps he had, because what Tesla hinted at next was not just about lingering energy or spiritual vibration. It was about how memory survives death encoded, not in the brain, but in the field itself. And that's where we now go. Into the invisible library Tesla believed we all carry, but no one remembers. Tesla leaned back in his chair. Outside, the winter wind rattled the windows of the New Yorker hotel. Inside, his voice dropped lower, as if he wasn't just explaining, but remembering. He told the young interviewer that memory does not reside in the brain. Not entirely. The brain, he said, is more like a switchboard, a temporary processor. But the real memory, The true memory is stored in the field, the same field, he whispered, that holds the charge of lightning, the hum of the earth, and the trace of every thought you've ever had. He called it the universal field of imprint, a kind of invisible archive not unlike the magnetic recording strips he once worked on, but far more complex. Tesla believed that every experience leaves a residue, an energetic fingerprint that never fades, only disperses. According to him, birth is not a beginning, it is a reconnection. When a soul enters a new form, it doesn't come empty. It brings what he called imprints of resonance from all the lives it has lived, some strong, some faint, but all still vibrating beneath the conscious mind. He explained it this way: have you ever walked into a room and felt something unexplainable, as if the air remembers a sorrow no one speaks of? That is memory in the field. The structure forgets, but the space remembers. He believed that intuition déjà vu, dreams of unknown places, or sudden waves of emotion that make no sense, were echoes, not fantasy, not confusion, but fragments of a soul's prior resonance resurfacing, like a radio catching a station it wasn't tuned for. At one point, Tesla paused and said something unexpected. I believe we will one day locate this memory. We will map it, like scientists map the genome. We will map the soul stream. He described this soul stream as a pattern of vibration carried from one life to the next, not in a straight line, but in a spiral like the coils he used to design. And that spiral, he said, is shaped by emotion more than logic. What we love, what we fear, what we regret. These are the architects of soul pattern, not knowledge, but feeling, not data, but frequency. The young man asked him, do you mean reincarnation? Tesla smiled. Only in the sense that a song may find a new instrument. The melody doesn't die, it waits, and when the moment is right, it plays again in a new key. He then described something extraordinary, a personal experience he had in his 20s. While experimenting with electrical resonance in his lab, he claimed to have entered a kind of trance, a moment when all sound disappeared, all form faded, and only pulse remained. I was not here, and yet I was everywhere. I saw cities I had never visited. I felt griefs that were not mine. I remembered hands I had never held. He would never publish this experience. He feared ridicule. But in that hidden interview, he finally shared what he believed. There is a library within us, but it does not use words. It uses charge, and every life adds a page. The room grew quiet again. Even the radiator had stopped ticking. Tesla looked at the young man and said one final sentence before closing his notebook for the night. You are not who you think you are. You are the echo of everything you've ever been, waiting to be remembered. And that brings us to the next question. If these memories are stored not in the body but in the field, then what happens when the field becomes unstable? When energy lingers, unresolved, between this world and the next? That, Tesla said, is why some energies never leave, and some lives never truly end. The interviewer leaned forward, barely breathing. Tesla's words didn't sound like metaphors. They sounded like measurements waiting for units, like formulas etched in feeling. He asked the next question slowly. If the soul is energy, why do some energies stay behind? Tesla didn't hesitate. They don't stay behind, he said. They simply don't finish their return. He explained that when the physical body ceases, the soul as energy naturally disperses into the field. But not all energy disperses cleanly. Some remains trapped in interference. He called it vibrational distortion. Emotion is frequency, he said, and strong emotion, grief, rage, guilt can bend that frequency. It can create loops, echoes, residues. He believed that many of the so-called ghost stories weren't about spirits haunting a place. They were about patterns stuck in energetic memory, repeating, replaying, not because they want to, but because the emotion encoded within them has not been resolved. To Tesla, unfinished energy was just like unbalanced current, a loop with no grounding, a charge without a path. That's why some people feel presence in old houses, or why they dream of someone who's passed, not once, but again and again. It isn't the person, it's the resonance. We think the dead are gone, Tesla said, but many are still vibrating just beyond the threshold of our perception. Not alive, not lost, just waiting for discharge. He recalled walking once through a long abandoned building during a trip to Eastern Europe. He had felt something, not fear, but density, a heaviness in the air, not physical, but unmistakable. I couldn't see it, he said, but my field responded. My breath changed, my thoughts slowed. Something remembered itself there. This, Tesla believed, was the frequency of the departed. Energies not malevolent, but unresolved. They lingered, not to frighten, but to complete, and some, he said, attach themselves to the living, not by force, but by resonance. Grief attracts grief. Unfinished wounds recognize each other. A person can carry sadness that isn't theirs and never know why. The interviewer asked, "Can we clear that? Can we help them or ourselves let go?" Tesla nodded. He believed we could, but not by force, not by ritual, by harmonic resolution. He likened it to tuning a piano. If one string is out of pitch, the entire instrument vibrates in discomfort. But when one key finds its right tone, the whole system realigns. The way to release a lingering energy, he said, is not to cast it out, but to sing the note it forgot. This idea was radical, that healing for the living and the dead comes not through command, but through resonant compassion. He suggested that prayer, music, even focused intention could restore distorted frequencies and allow them to return to the field. At this point, Tesla's voice grew softer. His gaze drifted beyond the room. He looked tired, but not weak, as if he was speaking from a place halfway between presence and memory. If we understood vibration, he whispered, we would never fear death again. We would hear the soul, still ringing, just in a different key. And with that, the interviewer closed his notebook for the night. But Tesla wasn't finished, because what he said next would shift everything. We thought we knew about pain, about suffering, and about why the soul chooses to endure. The next morning, the interviewer returned to room 3327. Tesla was already awake, seated near the window again, hands folded, eyes closed as if he'd been listening to something no one else could hear. When the young man asked if they could continue, Tesla nodded slowly. He began not with science, but with a question. Have you ever considered why we suffer? The interviewer didn't respond. Tesla continued, voice low and measured. In every system I've built coils, turbines, oscillators. There is one principle that never fails. Nothing flows without pressure. He looked directly at the young man. It is the same with the soul. Tesla believed that pain is not a punishment, but a compression of energy, a necessary pressure that forces the soul to move, to shift, to rise. The soul is not refined in comfort, he said. It is refined in resistance. He compared it to the heart of a star. Too little pressure, and no light is born. Too much, and the star collapses. But the right pressure creates fusion. Suffering, he said, is fusion of the soul. It brings light where there was only structure. Tesla wasn't speaking philosophically. He framed pain as an energetic catalyst, an intense frequency that forces the stored patterns of the soul to vibrate differently, to shake loose the illusions it once clung to. The interviewer asked if that meant we should welcome pain. Tesla shook his head. Not welcome, but recognize. When you feel pressure, ask not why me, but what now must move within me. He believed each moment of heartbreak, loss, betrayal, or confusion was actually a signal, an indication that the soul was nearing a new vibrational threshold. He called this process energetic refinement, a phrase that sounded cold, until he explained it. What breaks you, he said, also remakes you. Just as lightning must strike to purify the air, so too must suffering strike to clear the static of old frequencies. Tesla believed that many people carry within them frequencies inherited from other lives, wounds not remembered, but still vibrating. These wounds, he said, attract pain in the present so that they can finally resolve. It is not punishment, he said again. It is permission to evolve. The interviewer was silent. He thought about his own life, losses that had never made sense, emotions he couldn't explain. Tesla noticed. You felt it, he said gently. Something in you was being tuned. Then Tesla leaned forward and offered a metaphor he had never written down. Imagine a violin, never played. Dust gathers, strings loosen, but when pressure is applied, fingers bow. Tension, it sings, and in that sound, the soul remembers its design. The interviewer asked if everyone must suffer to evolve. Tesla smiled, but it was not a joyful smile. Not everyone needs fire. But most of us forget too deeply, and sometimes it takes the dark to help us recognize the light within. At this moment, the room felt different, not mystical, but still, as if the weight of the words had slowed time. Tesla folded his hands, looked at the young man, and spoke the final thought of the morning. You are not weak because you grieve. You are not broken because you suffer. You are becoming, and becoming is not gentle. The interviewer closed his notes again. But Tesla added one more thing. If energy does not die, then neither does your growth. Every pressure you endure builds the structure your next life will stand upon. And that brings us to the spiral. The pattern Tesla believed was not just in nature, but in every soul, a shape not of escape, but of return. By the time they met again, Tesla seemed even more withdrawn. The air in the room felt heavier, as if the space itself understood this was one of the final conversations. But when the interviewer mentioned the word reincarnation, Tesla stirred with quiet clarity. The soul does not return because it must, he said. It returns because it remembers there is something unfinished. He didn't see reincarnation as a cycle of punishment. He saw it as a spiral, a motion of refinement, not repetition, but evolution through return. Tesla explained that the soul, like electricity, follows a spiral pattern, not a straight line. From planetary orbits to magnetic fields, from DNA coils to galaxies, everything in nature moves in spirals. Why should the soul be any different? Spirals allow energy to re-enter the same space at a higher level, he said. That is what we call growth. He believed that after death, when the body dissolves and the personal identity begins to thin, the soul doesn't vanish. It folds back into the greater field, but not all of it. There is always a residual note, he said, something in the field that wants to complete its vibration. That note, that unplayed chord, is what calls the soul back to a new form, a new time, a new chance to resolve what remained dissonant. The interviewer asked, but if we forget everything, how do we grow? Tesla looked toward the ceiling, eyes half closed. You forget the names, you forget the faces, but you don't forget the frequency, and that frequency pulls you toward the people, the places, and the challenges that will help you rise. He compared it to resonance in a tuning fork. Even if you strike a fork in one room, a matching one across the house will hum. Memory, he said, is not stored in the mind. It's stored in the motion of energy. That's why some people feel drawn to places they've never been. Why some relationships feel instantly deep or irrationally difficult. Why some fears emerge without cause. You are not haunted by ghosts, Tesla said. You are haunted by unfinished harmonics. He told the story of a woman he once met in Paris who claimed to see colors around people. She described Tesla's as silver and spiraling like a staircase made of sound. He didn't dismiss her. In fact, he believed she had seen something real, a pattern of return, unique to every soul. Each of us has a soul print, he said, not a fingerprint, but a vibration pattern, a spiral of memory, emotion, intention. When the soul returns, it doesn't start from zero. It begins again but higher, wiser, more attuned to what it came to heal. And yet, Tesla also believed we are never forced to return. He viewed reincarnation not as karma's prison, but as the soul's choice, a chance to realign. We choose the path that best completes our unfinished chord, he said. Some choose peace, others choose challenge. All of it is music trying to resolve. The interviewer, silent for a while, finally asked, "Do you know if you'll come back?" Tesla smiled faintly. "I won't return to the world of machines," he said, "but I may return where silence still hums, somewhere I can finish the song I started." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "You don't need to remember your past lives. They remember you. And if you listen closely, they still sing through you." With that, he closed his eyes and rested. But the interviewer knew the conversation wasn't over, because Tesla had not yet explained where the soul goes between lives, nor how it heals, nor what it becomes before it returns. The next evening, the interviewer arrived to find Tesla sitting in near darkness. The only light came from the street lamps outside, casting long shadows across the room. He looked frail, not just in body, but in presence, as if parts of him were already stepping beyond the threshold. The interviewer asked softly, "What happens in the space between lives?" Tesla opened his eyes, slowly, clearly, and then he spoke. "That is where the real work begins," he said. "Between the lives is not a void. It is a mirror, a field where the soul sees itself, not as it thought it was, but as it truly is." He called it the interval field, a realm beyond time, where frequency stabilizes, where the energetic pattern of the life just lived can be decoded, decompressed, and understood. "It's not judgment," he said. "It's clarity. No one points a finger. The soul simply sees itself fully, truthfully, without resistance." Tesla believed this field operates outside of human language. It is not a courtroom, not a waiting room, but a kind of resonant bath, where what was fractured can begin to return to coherence. In this space, the soul reviews emotion, not events. It doesn't tally deeds like a bookkeeper. It feels the full ripple of its choices, how one moment of kindness softened a stranger's fear, how one harsh word seeded a lifetime of doubt, how even a silent decision, made in isolation, echoed outward into the lives of others. The interviewer asked, "Do we remember all of it?" Tesla nodded slowly, not as facts, as resonance, as weight, as warmth, as frequencies that rise or sink, depending on their alignment with truth. "In this field," he said, "the soul often experiences what he called the light of pattern recognition. It's not a light that blinds. It's a light that reveals. We do not meet God as a being," he said. "We meet the source as a field of pure coherence. And in that field, our own dissonance dissolves." Tesla spoke gently of soul fragmentation, how in some lives, trauma causes pieces of the soul's vibration to split, to scatter. The in-between is where these fragments are called home. And sometimes, he said, a soul must remain in that healing field for what feels like centuries. Because healing, he said, is not just rest. It is remembering the vibration you forgot. He shared one more insight, slowly, as if reciting something once whispered to him in a dream. "Before we return, we choose from the possibilities shaped by what we've learned. And what we haven't, we are not assigned lives. We resonate into them. That's why some people feel as though they were meant to be where they are. Or why certain people feel instantly familiar, It is not fate in the way we think of it. It is resonance. Energy finds its matching field, he said, and when the soul is ready to return, it will find the parents, the body, the path that reflects what it still seeks to integrate. Tesla paused, looked out the window once more, and then turned back with a gaze clear and quiet. Between the lives is not distance, he said. It is recalibration. It is the pulse between breaths, the moment when the wave remembers it was always part of the ocean. The interviewer asked if he feared death. Tesla smiled. I've met it already, he said, and I found only silence. And then music. With that, the evening ended. But Tesla had promised one more conversation, one final topic. The last question the young man had written in his notebook. What survives when everything else fades? And in that last meeting, Tesla would offer the clearest answer of all. It was snowing the night of their last meeting. The wind pressed against the window panes like a restless memory. Inside room 3327, Nikola Tesla was already seated, hands resting gently in his lap. He looked smaller now, but his presence somehow felt larger than ever. The young man, aware this could be their final conversation, asked only one question. If the body fades, if the memory dissolves, what survives? Tesla looked up slowly, his eyes soft but precise. Not the name, he said, not the face, not the story. What survives is the pattern. He wasn't speaking of behavior or reputation. He meant energetic architecture, the unique frequency of the soul, shaped by every moment of truth, love, courage, and awakening. Tesla called it the signature current, a field of information so refined, so subtle, it could pass through light itself and still remain intact. The universe does not remember your identity, he said. It remembers your intention. It holds the imprint of what you loved, what you stood for, and what you changed, inside yourself and in others. This was not romanticism. To Tesla, it was physics. He compared the soul to a wave, not just any wave, but a wave with a distinct frequency that continues to echo long after the source is gone. He pointed to gravitational waves, still detectable billions of years after a star's collapse. So too with the soul, he said. The collapse of the body does not end the wave. It only ends the form. The signal continues into other systems, into other hearts. He believed this pattern was interactive, not just surviving, but participating in the lives of others, whispering through intuition, guiding through dreams, tugging at the edges of someone's awakening. Some call it guardian angels, Tesla said. Others call it déjà vu. I call it persistent resonance. He described love as the highest stabilizing frequency, capable of preserving pattern across dimensions. The love you gave survives, he said. The courage you showed even once survives. The choice to heal rather than harm survives. These became the strands of the soul's final form, not visible, not linear, but alive. In the field, Tesla paused, as if listening again. You will not remember every life, he said, but the field will, and the field never lies. He believed that when we pass, we are not judged by a divine figure, but met with our own pattern, reflected back to us with total clarity. You see yourself, he whispered, not as others saw you, but as you truly were. In that moment, he said, there is no shame, no punishment, only recognition. And from that recognition, you choose to rest, to return, or to dissolve. Back into the great harmonic. The interviewer sat silently, unable to speak. Tesla, sensing the weight of his words, closed the notebook himself. The secret, he said, is not in defeating death. It is in understanding that nothing true can be lost, only refined, only remembered. He stood slowly, walked to the window, and looked out. The snow had stopped. Only stillness remained. I was never trying to light cities, he said quietly. I was trying to light the soul. He turned once more, his voice now barely a whisper. You are not a machine. You are not a name. You are not even a life. You are the light that survives all of them. And with that, Nikola Tesla sat down once more. The pages were closed, the final frequency spoken, the signal still echoing. If something stirred within you, a feeling you couldn't quite name, a memory that didn't come from this life, or a softness you haven't felt in a long time, trust it. That's not imagination. That's recognition. You were never just a story in a body. You are a frequency, a pattern, a current that remembers, and if Tesla was right, then every act of love, every moment of truth, every choice to heal instead of harden, is still alive in the field, still echoing, still becoming. Thank you for walking this quiet path with us. If these words brought you a sense of peace or remembering, feel free to leave a note in the comments, not just for us, but for someone else who may be quietly searching too. And if you'd like to continue this journey of remembering, you can subscribe to join us. We are just beginning to explore what the soul has always known. Until then, breathe softly, live gently, and listen for the light that still speaks through silence.